And what a great day to welcome back to the show Jack Crooks, founder of Black Swan Capital, and you can find him at blackswantrading.com. But my goodness, Jack, I mean, this kind of volatility must just excite you no end. I mean, you get the kind of moves in currencies. That's where this played out first and foremost, was these currency moves. And, you know, I got a feeling we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. It was just it was incredible. I stayed up most of the night watching Sky News Live and then watching my screens, and these moves were, extraordinary. What can you say?
I did the same thing, by the way. You know, it was into Thursday night, and I was going, holy smokes. And, I think I hit the sack at about 5 a.m. and got up at 6 a.m.,
Right.
Because it was incredible. It was first watching the vote come down and look, there was a great service I was looking at who was literally giving me poll by poll and seeing the geographical distribution of the vote, all of that stuff. And then of course I was looking at the immediate reaction in the Asian markets, and I went and got a cold towel after I watched what the heck was going on with the Nikkei,
Exactly. It ended down with about 1,200 or something.
Yeah, it was incredible. And then, of course, the British pound itself. I mean, and again, it was tough to get the simultaneous timing because I'm watching the political vote come in and the counting. But it seemed to me as soon as the Leave side even showed the strength it did, it wasn't anywhere close. I mean, it was like 10% of the polls were in, and I saw the British pound drop around 6% in a few minutes. Okay, then I go back to the polls, go back to the pound. Now it's down 10%. That's the kind of night it was.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was tough for somebody to trade, really, because the moves are so extraordinary in a leverage market like spot forex.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to ask you about. That, I mean, I certainly couldn't get involved. I had a small negative British pound kind of position on, but it wasn't a trading position. It was more that, well, I think the EU is dirt anyways, and I think the pound's dirt anyways. So this was just going to exacerbate the process. But I wasn't I didn't see how to even get in that market. It was over my head anyways.
Yeah, I was sick, to tell you the truth, because I had a short pound going into this. I had to stop at like 149.80, and as soon as that first poll came out saying that it looked like Remain was going to look good, the pound surged to just over 150 and took me out, and then just went straight down. So that's the kind of day I had. But fortunately enough, we put on some puts on Tuesday for people in the currency option service, so that worked out okay.
So now let's go forward with this. What kind of things will you be looking at? Will you be driven strictly by technical factors? We've had that opening big move. What are you looking for going forward, or for opportunities, or that will give you the green light?
Yeah, I mean, and there's the short term, and as you said, the longer term, and I think the longer term is definitely the more interesting side of this. But short term, maybe we bounce, but to tell you the truth, we got some nice retracements in the currencies on Friday. They went a lot deeper than I thought they would, or retraced back to where they were. So we may open Monday, and these things may just start right out of the gate down. We put on a short euro in both the spot market and the currency options on Friday afternoon because the euro retraced a lot of its overnight losses. And I was hoping over the weekend, as everybody kind of dwells on this and finds out how terrible this really is for the European Union, it really starts to understand how awful the European Union is in general, and gets a sense of why this happens or has happened, and it's been long in the making. They hopefully will wake up, or at least will kick off the Asian market with the euro starting down. So I think short term. I think we could start down, again in a big way on things like the euro and some of the commodity currencies. But longer term, to me, the euro is the most interesting trade, of course.
I'm right with you on that. That's been one of, not from a trader's point of view, I'm more sort of a long-term investor, was our first recommendation of the short of the euro was at 160. Added at 140. Every major bounce, I said, this is just a chance because long term, this thing's going nowhere. It's surprising to me is that all this talk in the Canadian media, literally to a commentator, are going, "We're so surprised," and I'm going, "Boy, it must be dark in there with your head so far up it." But maybe someone could explain what they think the EU has done so well when it comes to economics. We're talking a flat-lining continent with no sign of recovery. I mean, they still have the same structural problems that they've had for the get-go, and the solution is to add 170,000 EU bureaucrats. And I just shake my head going, that's a beauty. I just don't see where the EU goes.
Your opening today that I heard was brilliant. And even going further than that, every single commentator and writer in the Financial Times got it wrong. And, of course, they use these massive scare tactics, as you said. They forget the fact that this transfer of sovereignty from the nation state to these supranational authorities, which the European Union is the biggest one at the moment, has created this massive discontent among its citizens. They have no power, no control. Britain estimates Britain's going to do away with 13,000 regulations from the Eurozone to this. Now imagine the improvement in entrepreneurism when you cut 13,000 regulations. So I think longer term, the UK economy, once they get through this, is going to be the place to be.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, they're going to be better off. What kills me is how, and again, I can only speak to the Canadian media. I've read a ton of the British media too. Haven't looked too much at the U.S. media, but this is exactly the problem with economic growth. Why do we think it languishes? Because their solution has been more taxation and higher levels of regulation and more bureaucrats. I mean, it's laughable. I mean, I'm wondering how many years of stagnation do you need before it dawns on you maybe that's not the recipe? But it sure hasn't dawned on the EU.
No, it hasn't. It's hard to believe some of these politicians and even these, economists, even the ones that aren't in the EU, can show up with a straight face and tell us how great this stuff is. You just want to laugh because it's not only created an economic turmoil, but as you said, the political turmoil. There is real talk of civil war in Europe. It's that bad for the citizens of these countries with what they've done with the open borders and just completely changing the culture. So this thing has run very deep for a long time, and to be shocked is really kind of laughable.
I just got a couple of quick numbers for you. Thanks to the EU, in Great Britain, there are 454 laws governing towels, 36 laws for radiators, 625 laws for coffee, 554 laws for dogs, 226 laws for stairs, 1,872 laws for cars. I mean, this is the EU regulation, and to not see that stagnates your economy is truly beyond me. I think longer term economically, they're far better off.
No doubt. And it also, Mike, it does show you why the big companies love this stuff, because it just cuts off any competition. You can't build a business in this environment, so therefore the big companies love it because they can handle it. They've got the administrations. They got enough to deal with it. So of course they're going to be hand in glove with the politicians. So usually, if the business environment, big business, is for something, the average guy on the street probably should be against it if it comes to economics.
I'm talking with Jack Crooks, Black Swan Capital. You can find him at blackswantrading.com. Plus, there's a great thing that they're happening down at Black Swan Trading for Canadians. The Canadians are going to be able to open a U.S. account that emulates the exact trading signals given in Jack's work with Black Swan Forex. And I'll tell you, that's where the action is, as we saw, obviously, yesterday. So there's more with that. I'll take a break. I'll come back with Jack. We'll talk more about some of the opportunities, but we've just alluded to one. I think the EU is doomed. I think every time you get a major rally in the euro, it's an opportunity to play it to go down. More with Jack Crooks, though, in just a couple of minutes. Can you answer this for me? Why is it only the people who voted leave were the ones who didn't quite understand, according to the media? Give me a break. The media, had no clue what was at stake here, could not predict it, do not know what's coming next. Let's be clear on that. But Jack Crooks is working in the best part of this business with Black Swan Trading. That is the currencies. That's where you're going to see the action there. Jack, can I just throw a couple quick things at you? We just talked about the euro. We've talked about the pound. What about the impact on the U.S. dollar, Canadian dollar, or anything else you want in the currency field?
Yeah, I think the U.S. dollar does well on this, and obviously get a major risk bid. We saw some of that on Thursday night, less so on Friday as some of these retraced. But the reality is the euro as a currency is now diminished its role as a world currency in a very big way. and therefore the allocations are going to go even more into the U.S. dollar. Right now, they're 62% global reserves are in the U.S. dollar. I forget what the euro is, but that's going to diminish. So either way, you're going to see more dollar demand to replace currency reserves for the euro. So one, on a very broad, structural basis. Two, I think this doesn't help global growth that was already in trouble. So the pressure, I think, out there is going to increase because there's just going to be, a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty as this transition takes place, and that's not going to be good for global trade. So again, you're going to see these peripheral nations, I think the emerging market countries that, in fact, have seen their dollar-denominated debt double since the crisis. The pressure on them is going to be just great. And again, I think you're going to see a lot of money rolling out of there and back to the center because their dollar funding cost is going up, and the products they sell, which is basically commodity-based, are going down. Very, very bad recipe when you've doubled your debt since the crisis. So the dollar, I think, is going to get a major money flow bid, especially on global recession. The world reserve currency always does well in global recession because risk comes out from the outside and back to the center. And without a European capital market, which is, that project is completely off the table now, the U.S. capital markets and Japan are the only place to hide. So I think that's going to help the dollar. As to the Canadian dollar...
Let me just hold you at that for a sec. I'll come to the Canadian. I just want to make sure people heard what you just said. That is wonderful analysis. I mean, one of the big things is the euro's off the table as sort of the international currency alternative. With that level of uncertainty, it's also going to really expose the flaws within the EU itself. And I just think that is such a pivotal point, and you aren't hearing it anywhere else. Thanks to Jack Crooks for that. The implication are money's going to flow into the U.S. That's one of our major themes on Money Talks when it comes to the investment markets. That served you incredibly well. I'm in a business where getting it right counts. We've given you long-term trends that every one of them has played out. So please, keep the hate mail coming. But the U.S. dollar stands to be a major beneficiary. But I love your other point because it's one of our other themes that we've entered this age of deleveraging and debt crisis. And there's $9 trillion denominated in U.S. debt throughout the world, outside of the U.S. And now the U.S. dollar goes up while their productivity and economic performance goes down. That's a terrific point that points to more instability going forward.
Yeah, no doubt. Totally agree, man.
So can you come to the Canadian dollar for us?
Yeah, I think the Canadian dollar gets hit, but on a relative basis. I think, if I had to guess, it comes to maybe it revisits those lows. I don't know, but I don't see it as a disaster because, again, of its locale being in North America, and the relative stability, of the Canadian banking system compared to these emerging markets. But I don't think, an environment in which we see massive deleveraging from countries that are, that are dependent on commodities is going to be good for the Canadian dollar. So I do think it gets hit. We're looking.
But do we get hit vis-a-vis the euro?
Basis of a recovery back to like 135, Mike.
Yeah.
And on dollar CAD, but as you guys look at it, that's probably around 70 cents.
Yeah.
So that's, but we're beyond technicals here if these global macro fundamentals play out, and it's just a function of again the impact on the emerging markets, and then of course the elephant in the room, China, which we haven't talked about.
God, there's so much to do, but Jack, I want to thank you for taking the time. But this is the other thing I want to do. First time ever, Canadians can open a U.S. account that follows exactly the trading signals given in Jack's work and the Black Swan Forex. Go to moneytalks.net, click on there, because this is where the action's going to be. You just heard the quality of Jack's thinking about this. It's very exciting. Jack, thanks for taking the time with us.
Thanks again, Mike, for having me.